Last summer, as I sat in the Columbus, Ohio airport waiting for my plane home following the ELCA churchwide assembly, I was struck by this idea of growing together in faith and hope and love. And I felt it was a good way to build on last year's theme of better together. And I really wondered what it looked like to grow together in faith, what it looked like to grow together in hope, and what it looked like to grow together in love. So to get at these ideas, I wanted to share some examples. What's it look like? And I wanted you to hear the stories of people who have experienced this growth. And I want us to be reminded that growth is both spontaneous and fast at times, and deliberate and frustratingly slow at times. But it is all in God's time. So our first story about growing together in faith, here to share the story of the West Fork Food Pantry, is Pastor Kim and Diane Wills of Zion St. John Lutheran Church in Sheffield.
Good morning. This is Mrs. Oglesby, and you'll learn more about her in just a bit. So growing in faith. The Great Commission tells us, go and make disciples of all nations, baptize them, teach them, help people to grow in their faith. But really, how do we measure spiritual growth? I think it's difficult. We can look at statistics like church attendance, financial giving, volunteer hours. But I know a lot of very faithful people that don't have much money to give. When it comes right down to it, it's difficult to measure.
But Jesus did a lot of teaching about faith and growing our faith. Remember when he said, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, that God can take that and do amazing things with it. But sometimes I wonder if we really believe that. I mean, do we really go all in? And then Paul taught us, walk by faith, not by sight. Don't worry about what you see. Just know what you believe in your heart, and it will all be okay. But really? I mean, if it was so easy, wouldn't we all have faith the size of mountains? I mean, huge, right? But then we have all these things that sneak in, like doubt, worry, anxiety, fear. That's a big one. And we can't let that get in the way, right?
Yes. Today, Diane and I are here representing a lot of people to share the story of the West Fork Food Pantry. We're representing wonderful volunteers and 5 congregations from 2 different denominations. We've learned a lot on our journey together, but here are 3 things as we sat back and reflected really came to mind. The first is we have to be willing to listen to God and to listen to one another. And then we have to have open and caring hearts. And third, we have to follow Christ, always.
So this tiny little mustard seed started in 2016. Heard an ad on the radio station. The Food Bank of Iowa was looking for a mobile food pantry in Franklin County. And we talked about it, and we thought, oh, is that something we could do? Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know. What do you think? We talked about it. We went to the council. We talked about it some more. And we decided, yeah, we're going to give it a try. Maybe this is a chance for our congregation to be inspired, to help people, to help their neighbors. Maybe this would be good for our community. But then we started thinking, would there be enough volunteers? I mean, would people actually show up? Or would it be just him and me? Yeah, you know it, right? You know the drill. Yeah. and then we thought, Sheffield is 1,000 people. Is there really people that need help that badly?
And God said yes. We didn't hear a booming voice from heaven. The first time we distributed food, there weren't multitudes that showed up. There were 16 families and a handful of volunteers. The Food Bank of Iowa would deliver the food. We'd set it out on tables. And then our volunteers would help them shop, then take their groceries out to their car. And then at the end, we had the big challenge, what do we do with what's left over? We took most of it to the food pantry down in Hampton. It was a mustard seed, but it was exciting. We were doing God's work, feeding people, and beyond that, listening to them. It was exciting. And really, there wasn't that much commitment on our part. The Food Bank of Iowa provided all the food at no cost. So things were going so well. And then...
Yeah, we took that tiny little mustard seed and we grew it a little bit. We had about 20, 30 families coming every month, and the food bank says, you know what? You guys are doing great work. We think you should become a permanent pantry. Yeah, so you're laughing. I can already see it.
Yep.
And that's kind of what we did. We're like, oh no, God, please. Can't we just leave things the same? We are Lutheran after all, right? Yeah. So it's like, just let's not rock the boat here, because that means if we do a permanent pantry, we have to pay for the food. I mean, it's discounted rates. It's like 14 cents a pound from the Food Bank of Iowa. Really cheap. But we still had to come up with the money. And we had to figure out where we were going to keep it all. After all, we were still in the church. Where in the world are we going to keep it? We already had no space. And then we had to figure out what we were going to do with the frozen stuff. We had no freezers at all. We had none. No place to keep anything. And we already had $200 in the bank people had given to us, but we had $400 in bills.
As we sat around the table and discussed it with the churches, there were a lot of doubts, or people said, we can't do this. I was pretty depressed. I looked out my office window one day and I said, Lord, this is your ministry. If it's going to work, you're going to need to sustain it. And it happened. Things started happening. Our council bought us a chest freezer. We had a family that weren't really even regular worship attenders. They said, we'll give you $100 a month. St. Paul's in Thornton said, we'll give you $200 a month. And the donations kept coming in. A businessman gave us turkeys for Thanksgiving and then hams for Easter and on. We realized at this point we needed to have a board. And so we formed the board with the 5 member churches to oversee us.
And that mustard seed really started to grow. Now we're up to about, 40, 60 families a month. We had twice a month distributions. We had 30 to 40 really dedicated volunteers. And they weren't just volunteers from our church. They were volunteers from other churches in our town, from the Methodist Church, from the Baptist Church, some from the Reformed Church. And it was exciting, so exciting. As volunteers, we were able to be like Christ, to accept our neighbors as they were. No judgment, just respect, love. We had hearts open, and we were actually helping people, and they were so thankful. But I'm telling you, it was exhausting. I don't think I've ever been so tired. Up and down stairs all the time. God's work is tiring. We were unloading trucks outside, in the heat, in the cold, in the snow, in the rain. It didn't matter. We were unloading trucks. And then we're sorting the food, taking it here and there and up here and down there. And we had 3 freezers out in the garage where we were putting food. We had 2 freezers upstairs. We had 2 downstairs, and we had another big cooler in the fellowship hall. Twice a month, we're pulling all the food out of the closets, putting it out on the tables, and then picking it up and putting it all away. Twice a month.
And we're some of the young ones. So, can we really sustain this? We knew God was providing. We needed to continue to listen, have open hearts, and follow. We knew the need was growing. We had so many blessings and so many questions. What we really needed was a permanent site. But how are we going to pay for that? And would our clients appreciate that? Spending $100,000 on a building, well, we could be spending that to help people instead. We needed a permanent site, but we asked the question, is it our will or is it God's will? So
our board, wise people that God sent to us, I have to tell you, decided that we needed to start searching. Now, we couldn't quite decide, should we rent, should we buy? We started looking at open storefronts downtown, but they all posed exactly the same problems. Lots of stairs, not enough space, not enough storage, and we still would have to unload all those trucks outside. So, we kept looking, the money kept pouring in. We kind of decided maybe we should look at building a building, but we weren't sure. We were waiting, and then COVID came. You know what that was like. You all remember. Lots of churches closing, businesses closing, and even pantries closing. And we debated, should we stay open? Should we close like everybody else? What should we do? And we decided we needed to stay open. But we also thought, we have a lot of older folks helping. We got to do something different. So we started doing curbside registrations. We did curbside deliveries. We had volunteers coming in at fairly regular times during the day to pack boxes because, you couldn't have so many people in the building at the same time. And we kept working, and we kept working. And, the need continued to grow. More of our neighbors were hurting. And not just hurting, they were really hurting. No jobs, no way to support their families. We had over 80 families coming a month now. But still, we had more volunteers. We had more donations, and we had amazing support from the Food Bank of Iowa, from the state of Iowa, and from our West Fork community.
And we came up with a plan for a building. We could build it right on our church property. We had a parking lot right next door. We got an architect to help us. We could build it for $100 a square foot. And then there was derecho and all these other natural disasters, COVID, shipping problems, supply problems. Now we're looking at $230 a square foot. There's no way we can do that. And God, why aren't you blessing this plan? And then later, looking back, we realized this wasn't God's plan, this was our plan. We wanted that church or that pantry right there. And it was wrong-headed. We needed to have something someplace else. So it belonged to the community. So it belonged to all of us. And so that's what we did. But where are we going to find that? And then a woman named Mary called me up, another mustard seed, and said, there's Deb's Wild Horse Saloon. It's for sale. Used to be the bowling alley. When I got to Sheffield, they said, don't ever go in there.
But,
I was raised in a tavern.
Sometimes listening for God means listening to other people, right? God puts people in our way, and Mary was one of those people. Very wise. She had a very willing heart and was wanting to help us follow. But boy, we still didn't understand. We were trying to figure it out. You know how humans are, right? We were trying to figure it out. And so we started negotiating. And we negotiated, and we did walkthroughs and inspections, and more walkthroughs, and more negotiating, and more inspections, and still we're waiting. 6 months later, we finally came to an agreement, and we had a new home for the West Fork Food Pantry. It was amazing. It was so exciting. This place is so big, you could have 3 pantries in there. But man, dirty and smelly and gross inside.
So Diane said, we're taking possession the end of May, we'll have it open July 1. We all said no. She said yes. So we scrubbed and cleaned, and believe it or not, by the 1st of July, we were in there. We started our capital campaign June of 2021, hoping to raise $90,000. And by the time we had our grand opening, on August 31st, we burned the mortgage. We had so much community support. A little girl with a bake sale out in front of the pharmacy raised $400. Amazing. And there was also this whole other aspect we had no idea about, food rescue. Diane got a Facebook message that there was a truck in Cedar Falls that was about a quarter full with mushrooms. It was refused at a Target distribution center because it was 2 degrees too warm. They said, we have a ton of mushrooms, you want them? We hadn't even started up our cooler yet.
Yeah.
So we came, 2,000 pounds of mushrooms. What are we going to do with that? We called the other pantries. We worked through something called the Means Database, and we found a home for all of them. And then we went to weekly distribution. on November 21st. It was great, so wonderful. We ended up raising $140,000. In 2022, we provided enough food for over 50,000 meals.
Now you might be wondering who this lady is up here. You know, one of the things we've learned, many things we've learned over the span of these last 7 years, our families that were in need, our food insecure friends and neighbors. Food insecurity brings along a myriad of things with it. You know, you're insecure about a lot of things, not just food. And one of the things we discovered was that our hurting friends and neighbors called the food pantry their home. It was their place. It wasn't our place anymore. It was their place. One of our older ladies made Mrs. Oglesby for us. She is our mascot, our greeter. She comes attired in all different costumes throughout the year. Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. She's attired for spring right now. She made her especially for our pantry. And then we have another gentleman, Johnny, who comes in every week. He's there every week, and he has such a hard life. But he has found a job at the pantry. He makes the coffee every week. And we didn't realize how important it was until one day when he couldn't be there. He was running late, and he called me. He was so frantic. And he said, I'm not going to get there in time to make the coffee. Can someone else make the coffee? And I said, yeah, we're Lutheran. We can handle it. But we've learned other things along the way, too. We've learned that we need to listen for God. And we need to realize that God speaks not just to us, but through other people. The people God puts in our pathway all the time. We need to be prepared to hear the word no. That's a hard one, right? But you know what I think is harder? Is when God says yes. Yeah. And we need to be prepared. Because, you know, when God says yes, you got to have a willing heart. You got to be willing to say, hey, we can do this. I don't know how, but we can do this. There are possibilities. Be open to the possibilities. Be patient when the challenges come. And there will be challenges. There will be ups, and there will be downs. It's kind of like a roller coaster. There will be excitement and exhaustion. There'll be prosperity and poverty. There will be fun and laughter, and there will be fear and doubt. But remember what I said. Faith is like a roller coaster. All you got to do is buckle up and hang on.
That's right. Really shouldn't come to a surprise for us that we've had all these ups and downs in our journey, for that's how it was for Jesus' own disciples. After 2 years, they came to him and said, Lord, increase our faith. I mean, they've been with him every day for over 2 years. They'd seen what he had done. But that's how it is. Our mustard seed is now grown into a bush. Sometimes it needs pruning. We continue to ask for God's will. And ask this question with us. What are the unseen needs in your community? And how can your congregation or congregations working together meet those needs? Looking back, our congregations have grown together in faith. Listen, willing hearts, following Christ.
And remember, buckle up and hang on.
Thank you.
I had the privilege of going and visiting the food pantry about a year ago. And my favorite line when I was there was one of the Lutherans said, because one of the partner churches is the Methodist church in town, they said, who knew these Methodists were good people? I say that Mr. Epley is a member of the UMC, and we have some other guests here too. So I was pleased that they knew that these people that they had lived with all their life were good people. They knew that ahead of time. They did.